Welcome to Dutch Horizons, where stories of exploration, innovation and exchange come alive from the time of the Dutch Republic. Here, we uncover how the Netherlands opened new world charting, new trade routes, building cities and reshaping global commerce. If you find these stories illuminating, please consider liking and subscribing to support the journey as we connect past achievements to the world we know today. In this episode, we set sail back to the earliest days of New Amsterdam. Together, we will discover how a modest Dutch outpost at the edge of the Americas transformed into a vibrant port. Exploring the founding, construction and daily bustle, we reveal why this unique settlement became crucial for Dutch ambitions, and how it helped spark global trade and cultural exchange that echo through history. Chapter 1. New Amsterdam. A growing port. On the rocky southern tip of an island beside the Atlantic, New Amsterdam began as a small settlement, little more than a scattering of wooden buildings. Here, the Dutch West India Company envisioned a foothold at the edge of the known world. Winds from Europe swept over the harbour, carrying the first ships and settlers to these new and unfamiliar shores. At dawn, workmen hammered planks into the marshy shore, laying down the docks where ships from the Netherlands would soon tie up. These simple piers quickly became gateways for barrels of salted fish, timber and furs, ushered into trading houses by bustling merchants. With each arriving ship, New Amsterdam's wooden skyline grew taller, and the wharf echoed with the voices of many languages. On crowded mornings, local farmers and fishermen steered their carts through muddy streets, bringing produce and fresh catch to makeshift markets near the docks. The scents of tobacco and spices drifted from open warehouses. Craftspeople, carpenters, croupers and blacksmiths set up workshops along winding alleys, shaping the bones and sinews of a budding colonial town. Life in New Amsterdam was a tapestry woven with ambition and adaptability. Merchants from far-off cities traded alongside native peoples, exchanging textiles for furs and stories for silver. The gentle knock of wooden shoes mingled with bustling market noise. As the sun set behind distant forests, lanterns along the docks flickered to life, casting amber reflections over the busy harbour. The settlement's location was no accident. Positioned at the mouth of the mighty river that would one day bear an English name, New Amsterdam commanded the gateway between continent and ocean. Here, Dutch ambitions could flourish, turning local resources into valuable exports: fur, lumber and saltfish. Every arrival from Europe expanded the town's reach and the Republic's influence. Through challenge and opportunity, New Amsterdam grew from a hopeful outpost to a bustling port. Ships arrived from distant ports: Amsterdam, Curaçao, even Africa, linking the Americas to a growing web of global commerce. In this confluence of ideas and enterprise, Dutch settlers built not just a town, but a linchpin of their Atlantic empire, setting the stage for centuries of exchange. Chapter 2. Caribbean Ventures, Sugar and Shipping. As Dutch horizons stretched southward, the Caribbean beckoned with promise and challenge. Here, Dutch merchants established thriving networks, eager to tap into the riches of sugar and other coveted goods. Their ambitions shaped entire islands, turning ports into bustling hubs where vessels unloaded and departed, carrying fortunes across the Atlantic. The pulse of trade brought energy, opportunity and, often, strained social realities. Warehouses along shimmering harbours filled with fragrant sugar, barrels of molasses, and crates packed with exotic spices. These treasures represented far more than wealth alone. They were focal points where lives and destinies intersected. Dutch merchants orchestrated deals that rippled across the oceans, while workers both enslaved and indentured laboured amid heat and uncertainty, forming the quiet backbone of this Caribbean economy, The Atlantic shipping lanes acted like hidden arteries. Massive wooden ships flying the Dutch tricolour sailed tirelessly between New Amsterdam and the Caribbean. Trade was brisk and constant. Ships brought textiles, tools, and eager new settlers south, returning north laden with Caribbean bounty. These journeys required careful planning, expert navigation, and swift adaptation to changing winds or the threat of unseen dangers lurking at sea. Every port told a story. St. Eustatius, Curaçao, and other Caribbean colonies teemed with activity as merchants negotiated, dock workers loaded cargo, and officials kept wary watch on shifting fortunes. The presence of Dutch influence grew unmistakable. Buildings displayed steep gabled roofs and bustling trade houses announced prosperity. Yet, beneath the surface, layered realities of hardship and hope shaped each day's routines. As the sugar trade flourished, the demand for workers soared. Plantations sprawled out across islands, demanding a relentless pace. Enslaved Africans and indentured servants alike toiled in the fields under harsh suns, their labour essential to the profits that drove the region's economic engine. The human side of this enterprise brought complex, lasting consequences that would echo far beyond the age of trade alone. Profits flowed, but so too did changes in culture and society. Markets spilled over with goods from distant lands. Language, food and customs mingled African rhythms, Dutch commerce, indigenous America's knowledge interwoven in daily life. Some found opportunity and wealth, while for others the promise of trade spelled displacement and struggle. The Caribbean story was one shaped by both collision and connection. The intricate system of warehouses, ships and harbours depended on precision. Merchants tracked their shipments with ledgers and coded marks. Crews braved weather and pirates to deliver their cargoes intact. Each transaction relied on trust, but also on calculated risk. In these moments, decisions in the Caribbean could set prices and spark fortune in New Amsterdam and across the wider Dutch world. Caribbean ventures forged a powerful link between economies and cultures. Dutch ships carried tropical riches back north, knitting New Amsterdam more tightly into global patterns. These connections fostered both advancement and inequity. Bustling trade led to vibrant communities, but also to enduring wounds. The legacies of sugar and shipping would shape not only the islands, but cities and societies far across the seas. Chapter 3. Atlantic Networks, Goods and People in Motion. Across the restless Atlantic, a web of routes connected continents and cultures like never before. Ships drove forth, tracing orange paths on the map from Europe to Africa, voyaging to the Americas and the Caribbean. The cargoes they carried included not only furs, sugar and goods, but also hopes, ambitions, and tragically the pain of forced migration, shaping the destinies of countless people along the way. Follow the journey of merchant fleets as they cross vast ocean spaces. These routes did more than move merchandise, they reshaped entire societies. Ships under Dutch flags, swift and sturdy, carried spices and silver, sugar and furs, weaving Amsterdam into the fabric of world commerce. Each stop along these orange lines meant the exchange of not just products, but knowledge, customs, and, often, difficult encounters between strangers. As sails rose along the horizon, Amsterdam emerged as a central node of this Atlantic system. Innovation in shipping transformed what was possible. Dutch shipbuilders refined vessel designs for speed and space, allowing even distant markets to feel within reach. The city's docks buzzed with the activity of loading goods, tallying inventories and charting new paths across the sea, making Amsterdam a global crossroads of opportunity and ambition. The rise of new financial tools propelled this exchange onto an even grander scale. Amsterdam's merchants pioneered modern banking and insurance, lowering risks and making long oceanic ventures more predictable. Joint stock companies gathered investments from many different backers, letting merchants build larger fleets and spread out their risks. Profit, enterprise and partnership were at the heart of this bustling Atlantic world. The movement of goods also relied on vast networks of people. Sailors, traders, craftsmen and labourers from many backgrounds worked side by side, some seeking fortune, others forcibly uprooted. European desires for sugar, tobacco and spices drove not just commerce, but the expansion of plantations and the exploitation of enslaved African people. Their stories became an inseparable part of the Atlantic Network's legacy. At every port, exchange meant more than trade. Languages mixed on the docks as Dutch, English, French and African tongues blended in shouts and bargains. This global web of commerce brought fresh fashions, foods and ideas to distant shores while deepening inequalities and forging new hierarchies. The goods that arrived in Amsterdam reflected the richness and complexity of these transatlantic encounters. Amsterdam was more than a starting point. It became a gathering place for innovation and strategy. The city's warehouses overflowed with imported goods, ready for resale and redistribution. Merchants mapped supply chains stretching from the forests of North America to the sugar mills of the Caribbean. Banks, counting houses and marketplaces flourished, making the city a hub of not only wealth but influence over global affairs. As the Atlantic world grew denser with traffic and ambition, the consequences reached far beyond trade. People's lives were bound up in economic winsome rising in fortune, others suffering loss and displacement. Through it all, the Dutch presence, anchored in Amsterdam, shaped the rhythms of the Atlantic and left behind a complicated heritage of innovation, expansion and enduring human connection. Chapter 4. Rivalries and Conflict. Competing Empires. Across the New World, the ambitions of the Dutch, English, Spanish and French collided in a contest for dominance. Harbours, once peaceful, became arenas for naval engagements, their cannons echoing over the waves. Tension simmered on land and sea, each power watching the other with suspicion. Amid shifting alliances, the struggle for influence would shape the very fate of New Amsterdam and its Caribbean partners. Rivalries in the Americas were fueled not just by national pride, but by the promise of trade and wealth. Each empire sought to outmaneuver the other sometimes through open battle, but just as often with secret deals and fragile truces. Pirate raids and privateer attacks became tools of strategy, hunting for gold, sugar and furs. The competition could erupt in violence at any moment, yet diplomacy and commerce moulded the region's ever-changing balance. Naval battles in New Amsterdam's harbour were dramatic displays of power. Dutch warships, sturdy and swift, defended prized trading posts from rival fleets. Engaged in smoky combat, the outcome often decided which flag would rise over the town at sunrise. In those critical hours, merchants and townsfolk watched from shore, their fortunes hanging in the balance with each turn of battle. Victory at sea could mean new trade deals, while defeat might bring occupation. Yet out of the conflict, uneasy peace sometimes emerged. In quiet periods, the harbour would fill with ships flying different colours. Dutch and English merchants might trade side by side, wary but civil, as French fur traders negotiated their own bargains. Temporary calm allowed commerce and the spread of ideas, though always with watchful eyes. Beneath polite greetings, every handshake and shipment reflected the uncertainty of tomorrow's alliances. Caribbean outposts, too, became stages for imperial competition. Sugar plantations drew Dutch, Spanish and English settlers, each hoping to profit from the booming trade. Forts rose on tiny islands, bristling with cannons. Skirmishes on land and sea shifted control of towns and harbours overnight. The lure of cargo and territory drove constant manoeuvring, and the prosperity of New Amsterdam was forever linked to the ever-shifting fortunes of these tropical colonies. As old enemies sometimes became partners, allegiances never truly held fast. A change in Europe could spark new hostilities in the West Indies or New Netherland overnight. Diplomatic envoys crossed the Atlantic, bearing letters and treaties, but events on colonial shores frequently outpaced word from home. The search for advantage demanded quick decisions locally, where bold action or betrayal could tip the balance in these high-stakes rivalries. The economics of conflict were felt everywhere. Blockades choked off supply routes, merchants gambled on daring runs through hostile waters, and ports like New Amsterdam adjusted constantly to new trading partners. The price of sugar or pelts might climb overnight. Communities that once thrived could fall into hardship, while others rose from obscurity on the fortunes of seized cargo. In this fierce environment, resourcefulness was key to surviving the empire's great game. Though tensions often ran high, moments of coexistence appeared, fragile and brief. Shared risks sometimes led competitors to unite against a common threat. In these rare times, townsfolk enjoyed bustling markets and a rare sense of peace. But the memory of past clashes lingered, and the ambitions of distant capitals ensured that true stability was always out of reach. The destinies of New Amsterdam and its Caribbean neighbours were forever shaped by these cycles of rivalry and fragile peace. Chapter 5. Exchange of Ideas, Languages and Customs. Within the crowded streets and markets of New Amsterdam and its Caribbean outposts, daily life was a blend of voices, cuisines and customs from all corners of the world. People spoke Dutch, English, indigenous languages, African dialects and Caribbean creoles. Each group brought unique beliefs and practices, weaving a dynamic cultural tapestry that constantly evolved with each new arrival and transaction. Merchants, sailors and settlers mingled, trading not only goods but also words, music and cooking methods. The Dutch introduced stroopwafels and herring, while West African traders shared spicy stews. Caribbean influences brought tropical fruits and new rhythms. Indigenous peoples contributed techniques for fishing, farming and surviving harsh winters. In bustling taverns and waterfront stalls, these influences met, sometimes harmoniously, sometimes clashing, but always leaving lasting impressions. Religious traditions also crossed paths. Sacred songs echoed from diverse congregations. Protestant Dutch, Catholic Spanish, Jewish merchants and African spiritual practices all found space in these towns. Tolerance was often practical, necessary for cooperation and trade, yet tension existed. Some practices blended over time, forming new community celebrations and shared rituals. The Americas became a laboratory of religious coexistence and shared rituals. Laws, too, reflected this multicultural society. Dutch officials wrote ordinances in multiple languages so settlers could understand them, and legal disputes sometimes needed translation. Marriage contracts and business deals united families from distant backgrounds, creating fresh kinship webs. From schoolyards to city halls, the rules of daily interaction were renegotiated, fostering both innovation and confusion as customs collided and merged in innovation as customs collided and merged in unexpected ways. Children growing up in these melting pot communities often became cultural translators themselves. They switched languages easily, helped neighbours understand foreign customs, and invented new games blending old-world toys and Caribbean pastimes. Their friendships and marriages helped form a new local identity, either fully Dutch nor wholly African, Caribbean or indigenous, but something uniquely rooted in this early American crossroads of exchange. Festivals and public gatherings put these blended cultures on vibrant display. Markets buzzed with foods from many origins: cassava bread next to rye loaves, Dutch cheeses beside New World spices. Parades mixed drums with violins, dancers in wooden shoes alongside revellers in bright Caribbean headscarves. These celebrations forged bonds, sparked curiosity, and sometimes exposed the disagreements that lay beneath the surface of apparent harmony. Not all exchange was voluntary or equal. Enslaved Africans endured forced migration, while indigenous communities faced displacement and cultural loss. Still, oppressed groups preserved elements of their language and religion in daily life, influencing city slang, worship practices, and street foods. Their resilience helped shape the enduring character of towns like New Amsterdam, ensuring that even amidst hardship, multicultural innovation continued. Over time, the result was a world where languages borrowed words and dishes borrowed flavours. Customs adapted, blending celebrations, taboos, and everyday habits into something new. The Americas, first seen as a blank space to fill, revealed themselves as early sites of global cultural fusion. demonstrating how contact, both peaceful and contested, can transform societies and inspire lasting change in local life. Chapter 6. Short-lived control power shifts over time. As European powers competed fiercely for dominance, Dutch colonies found their futures shaped by international events beyond their own harbours. Treaties and wars continually redrew the lines of empire, thrusting New Amsterdam and Caribbean outposts into cycles of control and loss. In this chapter, we explore how transient authority played out on the world stage, affecting people, cities and legacies alike. The journey of Dutch colonial power was one marked by ambition, but also impermanence. New Amsterdam, founded as a hub of trade, would soon become a prize for rival empires. Military confrontations and diplomatic negotiations, like the Treaty of Breda, and wars with England shifted ownership of vast territories. The Dutch, famous for commerce and innovation, ultimately saw their political influence wane, even as their cultural impact lingered in unexpected ways. As British forces captured New Amsterdam in 1664, the city was swiftly renamed New York, signalling a major transfer of power. Yet, the transition was more than a simple change of flags. Local merchants negotiated terms, civilians adapted, and some Dutch customs persisted under the new rule. This shift clarified that colonial control was temporary, but the effects of Dutch leadership, street designs, traditions, city planning continued for generations. Elsewhere in the Americas and Caribbean, Dutch colonies like Suriname and Curaçao experienced their own tug-of-war. The Dutch West India Company struggled against fluctuating sugar prices, naval blockades, and changing alliances. Some settlements were abandoned or exchanged in treaties, while others adapted to new rulers. Economic realities often dictated which empires held these territories. The landscape of power was in constant, unpredictable motion, shaped by distant decisions in European capitals. Through upheaval, the Dutch left distinct footprints on land now governed by others. In former New Amsterdam, the original street plan still forms much of Lower Manhattan. Dutch-derived names like Harlem and Brooklyn remained, despite the switch to English governance. Place names across the Americas and Caribbean quietly remind us of an era when Dutch merchants, soldiers and settlers shaped these regions. Their presence endures, visible in the maps and languages of today. The decline of Dutch colonial control also meant profound changes for diverse communities, enslaved Africans, indigenous peoples, and European settlers. When the English took over, new laws and customs were introduced, yet many Dutch habits, building methods, and foodways lingered in everyday life. The fusion of culture shaped by both cooperation and conflict added new layers to cities and countrysides, long after political power shifted away from Amsterdam. Even as Dutch flags disappeared, economic practices remained influential. Early models of joint stock companies, global banking, and urban planning set by Dutch cities impacted successors like the English in New York. The city's multicultural character and tolerance had roots in its Dutch past. Financial institutions, architectural choices, and patterns of trade often persisted, shaping local life and supporting further waves of migrants drawn by opportunity and relative freedom. Through wars, treaties, and relentless competition, Dutch colonial authority faded. Yet, their spirit of openness, entrepreneurship, and adaptation remained embedded within these regions. Modern New York and cities across the Americas still echo with reminders of Dutch influence, from city layouts to place names and lingering customs. While control was short-lived, the larger impact of Dutch innovation and ideals has endured in surprising and subtle ways. Chapter 7. Lasting footprints, names, plans, and places that remain. Across the landscapes of New York City and its bustling neighborhoods, the influence of Dutch settlement lingers. From street names like Harlem and Brooklyn to the gentle curve of the canal-inspired city grid, echoes of New Amsterdam remain ever present, even after centuries. These remnants invite us to trace the story of early Dutch endeavours that still shapes daily life and memory today. The very layout of Manhattan owes much to its Dutch origin. The narrow lanes and broad avenues reflect choices made when New Amsterdam was young. Place names such as Bowery and Flushing survive as living reminders. The blend of old and new is visible every day in architectural pockets, neighbourhood festivals, and the resilient cosmopolitan spirit that characterises the city even now. Not just in city planning and architecture, but even in cultural habits, these Dutch legacies find their voice. Traditions like Santa Claus, derived from Sinterklaas, and community gatherings hint at those first settlers' customs. There is a continuity in the way people celebrate, collaborate, and mark the season's activities that began centuries ago and still influence how residents connect and create community together. Further afield, Dutch influence can be found beyond New York. Throughout the Americas, evidence appears to be at the patent farms of the Hudson Valley or trade routes marked on ancient maps. These pathways and settlements, originally charted by Dutch explorers and merchants, set patterns for cities, farms and economies that endured through generations and helped shape the modern Americas. Sometimes, the Dutch imprint is subtly certain tolerance in social life, a pragmatic approach to city building, or the welcoming of different peoples and ideas. These attitudes grew from the early days of New Amsterdam, when merchants and migrants from many nations mingled, exchanged stories, and built a community grounded in openness and commerce, values that still pulse within the city's heart. In daily routines too, legacy lingers. Think of stoop sales, detailed street markets, and even the habit of gathering outside each, revealing a deeper historical root. Old Dutch words survive in local dialects, whispered through generations. These subtle, almost invisible marks shape city life, connecting the present with a distant past that still quietly shapes the fabric of everyday experiences. Inviting viewers to look closer, the marks of Dutch settlement aren't always written in stone or carved on signs. Sometimes they're found in the rhythm of the city, the shapes of its neighbourhoods, and the persistence of traditions, each a footprint left from New Amsterdam's earliest days. The past lives alongside the present, giving each street and corner a sense of layered memory. As we reach the conclusion, the echoes of Dutch influence remind us that the story of New Amsterdam is not buried, but woven into daily life. Every park, street and community event tells a piece of this continuing legacy. By noticing these lasting footprints, we connect more deeply to the histories that shape us, and discover how the spirit of innovation, trade and exchange still animates New York and beyond.